The air was filled with the desperate cries of people calling for help. Chaos spread as someone shouted about a demonic beast attacking. Panic set in, and most people ran for their lives. But amidst the fear, a lone figure stood out, Yaking, breathless and weary. Yaking was an abyss scavenger, stuck at level 0. Unlike the job changers who fought monsters and gained power, Yaking couldn't even scratch a demonic beast. All he could do was scavenge the battlefield for leftover scraps, discarded loot, broken gear, anything of value. That was his survival. His system confirmed it. Yaking had failed to inflict any damage on the spirit wolf. As a level 0, society saw him as dead weight, useless, forgettable. Some even mocked him, calling him garbage. Now he was facing a white wolf, and his only defense, a crude wooden shield, had just splintered into pieces. The beast lunged, slashing into him, and Yaking was thrown to the ground. He felt it then, deep down, a gnawing truth. He was living like trash, but he clung to one fierce conviction: he would not die like trash. With that determination burning in him, Yaking pushed himself back to his feet. He fought with everything he had, and in a burst of effort and desperation, he finally managed a critical hit. The spirit wolf howled. Yaking had dealt damage. Just 1 point. But it was his first. Far away in G City, the sky was calm and clear. Within its boundaries stood an abyss gate of rank C. Yaking now stood before it, staring into its ominous glow. But the moment a shadowy figure began to emerge from the gate, fear overtook him, and he turned to run. Yaking often called himself a veteran scavenger. Every day, he picked through the aftermath of battles, recycling and sorting the remnants left behind by those who had real combat jobs. It was quiet, thankless work. The Abyss supervisor had strict policies. Nothing from the Abyss was to be exposed to ordinary people. Still, as Yaking dug through a pile of discarded loot, he uncovered something rare. A rank C crystal, worth over $50,000 W. Just as he was inspecting it, a voice called out. A man approached, eyes narrowed with suspicion. He told Yaking they'd be taking inventory, counting the dungeon spoils one by one. The warning was clear. If Yaking tried to pocket anything, he'd not only face a hefty fine, but possibly jail time. Yaking replied calmly, assuring the man that he had nothing to hide. He'd been doing this job for years and knew the rules inside out. Scavenger work was reserved for those stuck at level 0, but if the frontline fighters failed to eliminate all the monsters, those like Yaking, cleaning up the rear, could be the next targets. In truth, his lowly job carried real danger. And yet, he carried on, because Yaking, no matter how low his level, still hadn't given up. The base pay for Abyss scavengers working in the dungeon was 300 wan. On top of that, they received a commission, 1/1000th of the value of the garbage they managed to collect. On average, that brought in about 600 yen. However, after deducting a 30% agent fee, the scavenger's final take-home amount came to roughly 540 yen. At this point, Yaking still had a staggering debt of 670,000 yen looming over him. Yaking, determined to claw his way out of debt, resolved to work even harder. One day someone approached him with what sounded like a promising offer, a job that came with a commission of 3,000 yen. The amount was enticing, and Yaking was immediately interested. The man, wearing a yellow shirt and hat, invited Yaking to join the group, knowing full well that Yaking often vented about his financial struggles. Yaking's eyes lit up with enthusiasm, and he eagerly agreed to come along. Before long, he and a group of other ravine scavengers boarded a bus headed for a new destination. While on the bus, the scavengers began chatting about Shenfang City's central market. It was said to be a near-perfect replica of the ravine they normally worked in, and had been widely reported on in the news. Officially classified as an A-rank zone, it was infamous for its danger. The steep entry fees made sense. Many scavenger teams had met their ends there. Not a single person was rumored to have returned alive from the replica Abyss. One scavenger speculated that the whole operation might be another subcontract gig, and another quickly agreed, suggesting it was highly likely. Aside from the usual task of collecting debris left by job changers, this mission had another objective: retrieving equipment lost by a previous team. Some workers openly expressed their frustration with the powerful capitalists behind the scenes, calling them ruthless and heartless. They also questioned who had authorized the commercial monitoring of the ravine's location. Yaking, meanwhile, sat silently, listening intently to their conversation. Roughly 10 years ago, an abyssal gate had mysteriously opened, emerging from nothingness. From it came horrifying creatures that terrified the world. Humanity, unprepared, could do little but panic. Only the job changers, individuals with unique powers, could stand against the abyss monsters. These chosen fighters were able to inflict real damage on the beasts. After each monster's defeat, valuable items like magical crystals, strange weapons, and mysterious artifacts were often found. Since then, interest in the abyss had exploded. For many, it was as if humanity had stumbled upon a second new world, a realm filled with danger, yes, but also limitless potential. Many traditional companies eventually crumbled under harsh economic conditions. In response, a new sector emerged, built on public funds. This was the birth of the abyss industry. As soon as this new industry was formed, Yaking saw it as a lifeline. Determined not to miss his chance, he applied to several abyss industry branches. But to his dismay, every single one turned him away. Their reason was blunt. They had no use for someone classified at 0 level. Desperate to cover his sister's mounting hospital bills, Yaking scrambled for options. The hospital staff, once cordial, became cold and indifferent. They reminded him that this was no charity and threatened to discharge his sister if he couldn't pay up. On top of that, Yaking was 2 months behind on rent. The landlord pounded on his door constantly, demanding immediate payment. With pressure closing in from every side, Yaking made repeated attempts to join the ranks of the ravine scavengers. But rejection followed him everywhere. They mocked him, called him worthless, and refused to give him a chance. The job market was brutal for someone with a 0 rating. It became painfully clear to Yaking society had no place for him. He began to believe he was nothing more than discarded waste. Just as he was nearing rock bottom, a mysterious man appeared out of nowhere. The stranger offered help, but with a catch. He asked Yaking if he was in need of money, then offered him a strange object. In return, he demanded Yaking's most valuable possession, his organs. Yaking, recalling this moment, could only sigh deeply. Nearby, one of the ravine scavenger workers began talking openly about Yaking's personal life, as if he weren't even there. He mentioned that Yaking had borrowed $1 million from a loan shark named Loan Shark and lost it all in the stock market. If Yaking couldn't pay the debt, they said, he'd have no choice but to sell a kidney. The scavenger kept going, casually, bringing up how Yaking had a younger brother who relied entirely on him. They painted a bleak picture of his life, crushing hospital costs, debt, hopelessness. Yaking remained silent, staring at the ground as their cruel words poured out. They showed no empathy, no kindness. One even said he'd probably die under the weight of all his burdens. Another sneered, declaring that Yaking would never be more than garbage. Eventually, the scavenger team arrived at a replica of the ravine, deep in the heart of Shenfang City. A brown-haired man was already waiting when the group arrived. He immediately complained that the scavengers were too slow. The ravine workers rushed over, apologizing profusely. The other job changers warned the scavengers to stay close, reminding them that this was a dangerous place and they weren't going to be held responsible if something happened. Frustration ran high as shouts were thrown at the scavengers to move faster. Yaking remained silent but determined. This time he had to put in more effort. He needed the money, and he needed a way out. The scavengers, including Yaking, had now arrived at Shenfang City's underground public market, a B-rank abyss. This was Yaking's first time stepping into a B-ranked zone. It wasn't long before a pack of wolves appeared ahead. One of the job changers yelled for Lao Chun. Annoyed, Lao Chun muttered irritably, unimpressed that the monsters had just walked off the moment the group arrived. He looked unbothered, casually pointing out that the wolves were just low-tier spirit beasts. Without hesitation, Lao Chun launched forward, his power exploding in a fiery burst that scattered the wolf pack. The wolves yelped and retreated in panic. One of the job changers quickly reminded the team to stay alert. Danger could be lurking in any shadow. A bespectacled man inquired about their current objective. Someone mentioned they were heading to the 5th floor. A robed job changer chimed in, noting that the entire structure had changed. According to him, the 1st floor of the market had grown to 5 times its original size, and the ceilings were now over 3 times higher. The man with glasses nodded and explained that this phenomenon was known as abyssalization, a distortion mimicking real-world places. However, something bothered him. There were no signs of the last group sent in. No bodies, no remnants. The man with glasses ordered the ravine scavengers to search for corpses. Meanwhile, Lao Chun scoffed, muttering that people at level 0 were nothing but garbage. At that moment, Yaking stumbled, startled by something he saw, and accidentally bumped into Lao Chun, who was tying his shoes. Furious, Lao Chun glared at Yaking. Though the scavenger quickly apologized, it wasn't enough. Lao Chun grabbed him roughly, lifting his small frame off the ground with one arm. He snarled, saying that Yaking disgusted him and that he had nearly mistaken him for a monster. Other job changers intervened, warning Lao Chun to cool it. They were all on the same mission after all, but Lao Chun didn't stop. Yaking struggled to breathe as the man's grip tightened around his neck. Without warning, Lao Chun hurled him to the floor, sneering as he called him trash and told him to stay out of his way. Yaking was humiliated. He wanted to fight back, but all he could do was mumble under his breath. Lao Chun was an arrogant bastard who looked down on everyone. His tirade continued. He ranted about how the ravine scavengers weren't a real team, how they didn't belong. Yaking sat in silence, head lowered, absorbing every insult. To the others, Yaking was a burden, worthless and disposable. That's what being level 0 meant. But none of them knew the truth about ravine scavengers. They had an experience rating of 99 out of 100. And now, quietly and without fanfare, Yaking had just reached level 1. While the ravine scavengers were assisting the job changers in clearing out the remains of defeated monsters, a horrifying demonic beast suddenly appeared before them. Its grotesque form sent a wave of panic through the group, and everyone scattered in fear. Yaking, however, stood his ground, intrigued. He wondered if this monster had somehow slipped through the front lines. The creature was a spirit wolf, bloodied, wounded, and barely clinging to life. Yaking's only means of defense were a crude wooden shield and a basic level 1 staff. To anyone else, the injured beast was still a deadly threat. But to Yaking, it was an opportunity. Without warning, the wolf lunged. Yaking managed to dodge its feral attack, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. He braced himself and struck back, hoping to land a decisive blow, but his attack bounced harmlessly off the beast's hide. From a safe distance, the ravine scavengers jeered at him, calling him a fool. "Only job changers can harm demonic beasts, you idiot," someone shouted. Yaking heard them, but he wasn't surprised. Of course he knew that.
His status panel displayed pitiful numbers, 1 point each in strength, agility, intelligence, willpower, constitution, and luck. He wasn't strong enough to defeat even the weakest of monsters. No one understood that better than he did. But
he wasn't going to give up. Not here. Not like this. Somewhere else, Lao Chun was chuckling quietly. "Those level 0 wannabes get paralyzed with fear the moment they see a dying monster," he said with amusement. A few job changers nearby nodded in agreement. "We could make a fortune with just a few kills," one of them said. But another chimed in, more cynical. "If the abyss scavengers ever ran into a real demonic beast, they'd be wiped out. They're completely useless." They laughed and talked about dividing spoils. Anything valuable would go to them, and the scraps could be tossed to the scavengers. Just then, a cloaked job changer pointed toward a distant shape slinking away. "There's something else out there," he warned. Before they could investigate, they heard the panicked cries of the ravine scavengers. A demonic beast had reappeared. This time, however, the job changers spotted a shimmering purple glow near the creature, an extremely rare and precious item. Lachlan narrowed his eyes. "Back off," he said. "That one's already been claimed." He reminded everyone that the item had been pre-requested. No one was to interfere. Back in the chaos, Yaking was still locked in a desperate struggle with the spirit wolf. Despite his efforts, he was clearly outmatched. The beast finally sank its teeth into his right shoulder, and agony coursed through him. Blood flowed freely, and pain threatened to overwhelm his senses. But Yaking refused to die like garbage. With a cry of defiance, he gripped his wooden staff in his left hand and drove it forward with all the force he could muster. The strike hit true. Unexpectedly, it pierced deep into the wolf's body. A critical blow. Yaking stood there, gasping, wounded, but alive. Against all odds, he had hurt the monster. The system panel notified Yaking that he'd successfully inflicted a single point of damage. Gasping for breath after his struggle against the spirit wolf, Yaking let out a triumphant yell that echoed through the woods. Moments later, Lao Chun arrived on the scene and noticed Yaking standing over the defeated, low-tier spirit wolf. With a smirk, Lao Chun sauntered over and quipped that even an abyss scavenger could play the hero now and then. He continued his monologue, mocking the idea that job changers were wasting their resources retrieving Yaking's corpse. Lao Chun explained that career paths for job changers weren't rigid. Once someone gathered enough experience, especially at level 1, even level 0 members could transition to a new role. Hidden jobs were more accessible to those with that kind of progress. But the real challenge, he pointed out, was in leveling up in the first place. For someone stuck at level 0, unable to deal even minimal damage to monsters, the path upward might as well lead straight to the heavens, impossibly far. Yaking, however, had spent years navigating danger, risking his life in pursuit of even the slightest damaging attack. Through sheer persistence, he had slowly, painstakingly accumulated experience. He was now at 90%, and finally, that 1 point of damage against the spirit wolf had pushed him to the full 100%. That tiny breakthrough had earned him 1 full experience point. When Lao Chun mocked him again, Yaking responded calmly, saying that this was the only path available to him for gaining experience. With that, the panel system confirmed Yaking's progress. He had officially reached level 1.